My daughter Maribel called early one chilly morning, asking if I could watch her dogs while she was away on a business trip. It wasn't the first time she'd asked, but this time, it was for nearly 2 weeks, and she sounded more distracted than usual. Still, I said yes, without hesitation. It was the least I could do, especially since she had no one else nearby to help. The first few days passed quietly. I settled into the rhythm of feeding the dogs, walking them in the misty Oregon mornings, and cleaning up the little messes they made around the house. Their warm bodies curling against my legs in the evenings were comforting, even if the house felt too large and too empty without Maribel's usual bustle. Sometimes I'd catch myself reaching for my phone to call her, only to remind myself she was busy. But the phone calls became shorter, less frequent. When she did answer, her voice carried a tiredness I hadn't heard before, and she avoided talking about much. The distance growing between us wasn't just physical. It felt like she was slowly pulling away, closing a door I hadn't even realized was there. Still, I told myself it was just the stress of her job that things would settle once she was back. One afternoon, after I had finished watering the wilting plants in the sunroom, I wandered into Maribel's study, looking for my charger. The room was cluttered papers stacked high, and the smell of strong coffee lingered in the air. That's when my eyes landed on a red folder tucked under a pile of notebooks on the corner of the desk. It looked out of place, almost forgotten. Curiosity won over hesitation. I slid the folder out and opened it. Inside were documents, official-looking papers with my full name, my photo, and details I didn't understand at first glance. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages, the weight of what I'd just found sinking in. I tried calling Maribel right then, but the phone went straight to voicemail. I sat down slowly, heart pounding, wondering how long this had been hidden from me and what it meant for the life I thought I knew. The red folder sat heavy on my lap as I stared at the pages, struggling to make sense of what I was seeing. The documents weren't just any papers. They were legal forms, trust agreements, and ownership deeds, all with my name and photo clearly displayed. I blinked hard, unsure if my eyes were playing tricks on me. Why would Maribel have these? Why had she never mentioned any of it? I tried calling her immediately, my voice trembling as I left a message. Maribel, it's Mom. I found something here. We need to talk. But the line was silent. The voicemail greeting generic and distant. I sent her a text, too careful to keep it calm, asking if she was okay and when she might be back. No reply. Hours passed, and I felt a growing knot tighten in my chest. The house, which once felt like a temporary refuge, caring for her dogs, suddenly seemed cold and unfamiliar. What was I supposed to do with this discovery? The papers hinted at a sizable trust fund and shared ownership in a business, things that could change everything about my future. But instead of relief, I felt only confusion and a deep sting of betrayal. Had Maribel been hiding this from me all along? Had she been planning something without telling me? I thought back to our last few conversations, the excuses, the avoidance, the subtle distance. It all made sense now in a painful way. I paced the living room, turning the folder over and over in my hands. I wanted answers. But more than that, I wanted my daughter to be honest with me. The person I'd spent decades loving, supporting, and believing in now felt like a stranger. Finally, as the evening light dimmed, I reached out to an old family friend, a lawyer named Mr. Linden, hoping he could help me understand the tangled mess before me. I didn't know what I was stepping into, but one thing was clear. My life was about to change in ways I never expected, and I would need to be ready for whatever came next. Mr. Linden's office smelled faintly of old leather and polished wood, a comforting reminder of steadiness in the chaos I was living. I sat across from him, the red folder open between us, as he carefully flipped through the documents, his brow furrowed in concentration. But there was a softness in his eyes when he looked up at me. These papers, he said, slowly prove you're a beneficiary in a trust your late husband set up years ago. It's a significant inheritance intended to provide for your security. It looks like your daughter and her husband have been managing the assets without your full knowledge. His words landed like a heavy weight on my chest. I had spent so many years quietly struggling after my husband passed, raising Maribel alone, making sacrifices so she could have a better life. And all this time, a fortune was waiting for me, untouched, unknown, and now controlled by the very people I had trusted most. How could they keep this from me? I whispered. Why would Maribel hide something like this? Mr. Linden shook his head gently. I wish I had an answer, Felice. But the important thing now is to protect your interests. We can start by reviewing the trust's terms and see what rights you have to regain control. I nodded, the initial shock slowly giving way to determination. If my daughter thought she could sideline me, she was wrong. I had fought for my family all my life. I wasn't about to let a secret like this be used against me. Before leaving the office, Mr. Linden handed me copies of the documents and promised to help me gather more information. I felt a flicker of hope, but it was tempered by the knowledge that this fight would not be easy. Driving home, I stared out the window at the passing trees, my mind racing with memories of the past and the uncertain future ahead. There was so much I didn't know about the money, about Maribel's intentions, about the family I thought I understood. But one thing was clear. I couldn't stay silent anymore. The moment had come to face the truth and the people who had kept it from me. I sat in the quiet of my living room that evening, the weight of the folder's secrets pressing down on me. Memories came flooding back, years of endless sacrifice, quiet endurance, and unconditional love that I had given to Maribel. Raising her alone after my husband passed had meant working 2 jobs, sleepless nights, missed meals, and putting her needs before my own every single day. I thought about the time I stayed up late sewing her costumes for school plays, the way I scrimped on essentials to pay for her tuition, the countless moments I swallowed my pride so she could have what I never did. All those years I believed that love would be enough, that she would see me, honor me, and cherish the life we built together. But now I felt like a stranger in her world. I remembered how the distance had crept in slowly, almost imperceptibly. Calls grew shorter, visits less frequent, and her voice, once warm and familiar, became distant, even cold. I told myself she was busy, that life's pressures were pulling her away, but the truth was harsher. She had been keeping something from me all along, something that mattered far more than I had imagined. That thought stung more than anything else. I realized then that this wasn't just about money or property. It was about respect, about being seen as a mother, a person who had given everything, not as an obstacle or an afterthought. I had never asked for much, just honesty, a little gratitude, a place at her table. But that place had been quietly taken away. I folded the papers again and tucked them carefully into the folder. The past was a river I couldn't undo, but the future was mine to reclaim. The memories of sacrifice had fueled me this far, but now they would be my strength to stand up. I didn't know what Maribel's response would be when I confronted her, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. The time had come to face her, and the truth head on. My phone rang just as I was about to sit down. Seeing Maribel's name on the screen made my heart skip a beat. I answered quickly. "Mom," her voice was hesitant, tired. "I heard your voicemail." "That's good," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk about that folder I found in your study." There was a pause. Then she sighed. "Mom, it's not really a good time. I'm swamped with this project out of town. But it's about important papers, your business, our family's trust things I should have known about. I know you think you should, but I have been trying to manage things carefully. We didn't want to worry you. I'm not someone to be worried about or kept in the dark. I raised you with my whole heart, and this secrecy, it hurts." Her voice cracked slightly. "Mom, please. We're protecting the family. You don't understand the complexities. I understand enough to know I deserve honesty. If you keep hiding things, I'll have no choice but to get legal help." There was silence, heavy and uncomfortable. "Mom, don't do that. Let's talk when I get back, okay? I'm not sure I can wait that long. This isn't just about money. It's about respect." "I know. I don't want to fight." Neither did I. But the truth had to come out. I knew this conversation was only the beginning. Whatever happened next, I was ready to stand my ground. The first meeting with my attorney was both intimidating and strangely empowering. Mr. Carrick was a sharp man with a calm confidence that settled some of my nerves. As he reviewed the documents, he explained the path ahead, a legal battle to assert my rightful ownership and control over the trust and business shares. We uncovered discrepancies signatures that didn't quite match financial decisions made without my consent and transfers that seemed designed to edge me out. Each new detail was a small shock, a reminder of how deeply I had been kept in the dark. Despite the cold facts, I found strength in the process. For years, I had been sidelined silent, waiting for recognition that never came. Now, with Mr. Carrick's help, I was no longer a passive observer, but an active player fighting for justice. Days turned into weeks of gathering evidence, drafting petitions, and preparing for court. I stayed focused, though the emotional toll was heavy. There were moments when doubt crept in, wondering if the fight was worth the strain, fearing the damage to my relationship with Maribel. But whenever those fears surfaced, I reminded myself of all the years I had given, of the sacrifices, the love, and the truth I deserved to claim. Friends offered support, and I found unexpected solace in a group of women who had faced similar betrayals. Their stories echoed mine, and their encouragement bolstered my resolve. I knew this battle was about more than just money. It was about respect, dignity, and reclaiming a place I had been pushed away from. As the day of the court hearing approached, my heart pounded with a mix of anticipation and apprehension. The fight was no longer a distant threat, it was real, and it was now. I steeled myself, ready to face whatever came next. The truth was finally coming to light, and I was determined to see it through. Word of the legal battle spread faster than I expected. What I thought would be a private struggle soon became a public spectacle among family and friends. Some rallied behind me, offering quiet support and reminders that I deserved justice. Others whispered doubts and sided with Maribel, painting me as greedy or out of touch. The divide was painful. People I'd trusted for years now hesitated to call or visit, unsure which side to take. Even old friends seemed awkward, tiptoeing around the issue, afraid to offend either of us. I felt isolated at times, as if the very people I'd loved were slipping away like sand through my fingers. Yet amid the tension, I found unexpected strength. A support group of women who had faced similar betrayals welcomed me with open arms. Their stories mirrored my own sacrifices, made and disregarded love, repaid with silence or bitterness. Sharing my pain with them helped lessen the weight I carried alone. Each day I reminded myself why I fought. Not just for the money or assets, but for the respect that had been denied for too long. For the right to be seen and heard as a mother, a widow, and a woman who refused to be erased. Maribel's silence was telling. She avoided family gatherings. The tension simmered beneath every conversation, every glance. I wondered if she even understood the cost of what she was doing, or if ambition had blinded her entirely. Despite the fractures, I refused to let bitterness consume me. I kept my dignity intact, focusing on the evidence, the law, and the truth that would carry me through. The courtroom loomed ahead, a final stage where our fractured family would confront more than just legal papers. It would expose wounds deeper than money and force us all to face what had been broken. And when that day came, nothing would be the same. The morning of the hearing arrived with a heaviness I could hardly shake. Sitting in the courtroom, I felt the weight of years of sacrificed silence, and now confrontation settle over me. The room was filled with familiar faces, but none looked at me with the warmth I once knew. When it was my turn to speak, I rose slowly, steadying my voice as I addressed the judge. I laid out the facts clearly, presenting the folder's contents, the evidence of mismanagement, and the trust my late husband had intended for me. Each word carried the weight of a lifetime of quiet endurance. Maribel sat across the room, her expression unreadable, but I saw the flicker of uncertainty behind her eyes. The lawyer defending her tried to downplay the documents, casting doubt and spinning alternative stories. But I stayed focused, calm, and unwavering. The judge listened intently, asking questions that required answers Maribel and her husband couldn't fully provide. Witnesses I'd called, including Mr. Linden, supported my claims with professionalism and truth. The courtroom felt less like a battleground and more like a place where justice could finally be heard. Throughout the hearing, I kept thinking of my husband's voice from years ago, reminding me to never surrender what mattered most. That memory gave me strength when exhaustion threatened to take hold. As the session ended, the room fell into a heavy silence. The judge announced that a decision would be made after careful review of all evidence. I felt a strange mixture of relief and tension. The fight was far from over, but for the first time, I sensed the tides turning. Leaving the courthouse, I breathed deeply, the cool air filling my lungs like a promise. Whatever came next, I had stood my ground and told my story. Now the question was whether the law would see the truth as clearly as I did, and if my family could ever recover from the fractures this battle had exposed. The judge's verdict arrived on a gray morning, slipping into my hands like the long-awaited weight of justice. The court ruled in my favor. The trust and business shares were legally mine to control, and the evidence of Maribel's concealment was acknowledged. I felt a calm wash over me, not triumph or vindication, but a quiet reclamation of what was always rightfully mine. Maribel's reaction was difficult to witness. The defiance in her eyes gave way to a flicker of remorse she tried to hide behind cold indifference. The daughter I once knew was buried beneath layers of ambition and denial. I had hoped this battle would open a path to healing, but the wounds ran deeper than either of us expected. Despite the pain, I chose to walk away with grace. There was no gloating, no public accusations. Instead, I focused on the future I could now build for myself, a future not defined by betrayal, but by dignity and self-respect. Friends and supporters reached out their words, a balm to the wounds left by family fractures. I began to envision a life where I could reclaim my passions, my independence, and even the simple joy of quiet mornings without the weight of secrecy. As I signed the final documents to take control of the business assets, I thought of my late husband and the life we dreamed of. This was my chance to honor that dream, to live on my own terms, and to show that even after years of silence and sacrifice, I was not broken. The road ahead was uncertain. Maribel and I were separated by more than legal lines now, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope that in reclaiming my place, I might find peace. With the past settled, I turned toward what was yet to come. It was time to rebuild not just my life, but the parts of myself I had left behind. And so I stepped forward, ready for a new beginning. After everything settled, I finally allowed myself to breathe again. The weight of the past months began to lift, replaced by a cautious optimism I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just reclaiming assets or legal rights, I was reclaiming my life, my voice, and my dignity. I spent mornings revisiting old hobbies, dusting off forgotten paints and brushes that had once been my solace. Slowly, the colors began to flow again, vibrant and free, just like the person I was becoming. There was a quiet joy in creating, in turning blank canvases into stories of hope and resilience. I also reached out to others women who had endured betrayal and loss, who were seeking their own paths back to strength. Together, we shared stories, supported one another, and forged a bond that reminded me I was never truly alone. Some days were still hard. The absence of the family I once knew echoed in empty rooms and quiet evenings. But those moments were softer now, edged with acceptance rather than pain. I chose peace over bitterness, hope over regret. The journey had been long and winding, filled with heartbreak and challenge, but it taught me the true meaning of strength. It wasn't about never falling, it was about rising every time with grace and courage. And so I moved forward, not just as Felice Brandt the mother or the betrayed, but as Felice Brandt, the woman who found herself again and embraced the life she deserved. This was my new beginning.